I feel like this is something that we're going to see a lot of car companies doing, like Porsche is doing right now. They're sort of dialing back their plans of going, almost full EV or 80% EV by 2030, and instead focusing more on hybrids and still pumping out, refreshing the current internal combustion engines that they have. Because honestly, if you're gonna push a product that people don't really want, and you're gonna make your entire lineup, or close to 100% of the lineups, a product that there is no demand for, it's not gonna be a great business solution. So why not do exactly what Porsche has decided to do here, to keep for example, the internal combustion engine Macan alive, even though it's a very old model at the moment. But honestly, if I think about it, this came into production, I think, 2014. And I think that is actually a benefit in today's market, to have sort of a bit of an older design like we have right here. So what we're going to do in this video is have a look at this article from Car Scoops, where they talk about this specific situation that Porsche is in right now, that they're going to continue to push out hybrids and internal combustion engines for the foreseeable future, and also what's going on with the Porsche Macan EV, specifically here in the United States. So before we jump in and have a look at the EV Macan and the internal combustion engine Macan, compare the two from a front, side, rear, and also the interior in Photoshop, let's have a look at this article from Car Scoops. I'm going to link it down in the description. So Porsche to sell ICE Macan in the US for the foreseeable future. Well done, Porsche. Seems like a very, very smart decision from you. Due to sluggish demands for the Taycan and a rise of hybrid and ICE sales, Porsche has been forced to rethink its strategy. And as I said, I do think this is going to happen across the entire automotive field, where companies, I think the height was in 2022 or 2021, where a lot of car companies said in 15 years we're going to be a full EV company. It just doesn't work that way. So the current Macan platform, now over a decade old, has already undergone 2 facelifts, and over 80% of Porsche cars will be electrified by 2030, here's the important part, depending on global demand. So Porsche, like many automakers, is recalibrating its strategy in response to shifting political and consumer winds. Once steadfast in its commitment to an electric future, the sports car maker is adjusting its course, at least temporarily. Porsche is now exploring how to integrate more combustion engines into its lineup. And I also think that they should put more effort into... Porsche was at the forefront with this synthetic fuel that they were developing, I do think, in maybe Argentina or Chile or something like that. And yes, it's going to be very expensive in the beginning, but if they can figure out how to mass produce that, we can still have internal combustion engines in the lineup and still be pretty green. So the Taycan sales is not great, and the surge in demand for hybrids and combustion models, they just keep going up. So this change comes on top of a potential policy shifts in the US once the new Trump administration takes over next year. So Porsche CFO Lutz Meschke confirmed during the company's Q3 results that we will refresh our combustion engine cars, including the Panamera and the Cayenne, and of course we will continue to rely on plug-in hybrids, and I do think that is the way to go. I do like plug-in hybrids. The only downside with that, specifically when it comes to a sports car brand like Porsche, is that it's going to, there's no way around it. It's just going to add weight to the cars. And that is something that the engineers need to work very hard on, to keep this sporty feel of a Porsche, even though they are going to continue to push out hybrids. They've done very well up until now. I mean, the Porsche hybrids are fantastic cars, the drivetrains as well. So earlier this year, Porsche officially had indicated the production of the combustion Macan would end by 2026, leaving the electric version as their sole luxury compact SUV. That would be, to me, like cutting the lifeblood of a company, because the Macan, the internal combustion engine version of the Macan, is bringing in so much revenue to Porsche that just cutting that in less than a year now would, in my opinion, be a huge mistake. I do understand the challenges here, since it is such an old platform. To update it and be in line with regulations of 2025 is going to be very difficult and very expensive. And that is the reason why I think they should just make the smallest adjustments to a Macan to meet the regulations and still keep it in production, even though it is an aging platform right now. So the ICE Macan has already been pulled from European markets, not due to lack of demands, but because its platform is no longer meets the latest US cybersecurity regulations. Bringing it into compliance would be prohibitively expensive for such an old platform, and this is what we were talking about just a second ago. However, the combustion version remains available in key markets like North America, where regulatory standards are apparently less stringent. The current ICE Macan will continue to be offered in the United States in its current form for the foreseeable future, and will be sold alongside the new all-electric Macan, a spokesperson from Porsche told Car Scoops here. And this is going to be very interesting. It's going to be fun to see the comparison in sales between if we have both the internal combustion engine, a Macan, that's over a decade old, and compare the sales to the brand new Macan EV and see which one is actually bringing in the most revenue for the company. It's going to be very interesting to see that when the Macan EV goes on sale. It probably maybe already went on sale. So determined by customer demand and regulatory requirements. Depends on how long this Macan is going to be on sale here in the States, since they already pulled it from the European market. So the reality, however, is that the ICE Macan is no longer in the tooth, made even more apparent by the presence of the mechanically unrelated EV model. In production since 2014, it has undergone 2 facelifts, one in 2019 and then the second one, the latest one, in 2021, along with numerous smaller updates in between. It remains tethered to an aging platform with some inherent limitations that you simply can't fix, such as a tighter cargo space and more cramped passenger cabin compared to its rivals. And again, I do think this is I honestly think this is a plus, a benefit for Porsche. It might sound crazy. It's a little bit cramped in there, maybe a less cargo space, but this is a Porsche. Keep that in mind. This is not a Mazda or a Mercedes. This is Porsche. It's a sports car brand in its core, so I don't think the buyers of the Macan really cares that much that it feels maybe a little tighter than the 2025 competitors. And in addition to that, we're going to have a look at this in Photoshop in a minute. This interior feels, maybe with the analog clusters, might feel a little dated, but again, I think that is just a positive for the Macan if they keep this in production as is. So on the other hand, the Macan remains a standout in its segment, delivering some of the best driving dynamics you'll find in an SUV. Add to that the high quality, endlessly customizable interior, and it's easy to see why it's still a favorite. If it were to go beyond 2026 in its current form, Porsche will no doubt have to work some serious facelift magic to keep it from feeling outdated. Again, I don't think that is a necessity for this car. I think even if they just keep it as is, and still, as long as they meet the regulations for the United States, I think the Macan is still going to be a bestseller for the brand, even though some people might say that it feels a little outdated. So generally speaking, Porsche customers will still be able to choose between efficient combustion engines, powerful plug-in hybrids, and all-electric models in the 2030s. And they say here that completely depends on customer preferences and global trend. Global trends, and that is the reason why I think the 80% number by 2030 might be a little bit too ambitious, because people still want internal combustion engines, specifically for cars like this, Porsche, and so on. If it's just a regular A to B model or brand, then sure, go full electric, do whatever you want. If you're selling to enthusiasts, it's going to be we still haven't solved the problems with EVs to make them feel special and different from each other, because they all feel essentially the same when you're driving them. So let's jump into Photoshop here and let's have a look at this design from Porsche. We do have the Macan EV and the Macan internal combustion engine on the right side. As I said, when this first came out, I do think this is one of the best looking EV sedans on the market today. I think this is a beautiful looking design. Love the sort of Taycan style headlights that we have here. This gorgeous chamfer, small little detail like this. Not sure if you can even see it here in white, but we do have a small tiny chamfer or line going down here and creating this line into the front end, which has this almost shark nose design. Now this area for the turbo in this case feels maybe a little too static for me, but again, since this is an EV, this seems to be the trend with EVs, to have more static feel for some of the key graphic features. You can see that this is also not the headlight, this is just the position light or the daytime run lights with these 4 LEDs like this. The main headlight is a proper solid bumper headlight here, with the main headlight unit sitting inside of the bumper with this little fin splitting the two key graphics. I'm not sure what's going on down here, if this is a functional intake. I do believe this is probably a functional air slot for the battery cooling. You also have the battery cooling, of course, the main grille being all the way down here. But looking at these proportions and the design of this, it looks super sporty with these big muscles over the front axles. Typical Porsche. These are details that we need to have. It doesn't matter if it's an EV or internal combustion engine. We just need to have this sort of styling if it's going to continue to be in line with the rest of the philosophy of the Porsche design. And I do think, again, it's a really good looking EV, the Porsche Macan EV. Now looking at the internal combustion engine here with the facelift from 2021, where you got this huge grille in the front, this massive opening here. You can see the radiators or the intercoolers right here, depending if you have a turbo or not. And we can see all the black features here. I do think this is still a beautiful design. To me, this design does not look dated one bit. This is a design that can still be in production for at least another 5 years, in my opinion. It looks modern, it looks tight, it looks Porsche, and the reason why it can be in production for another 5 years is because Porsche doesn't go crazy with their styling. They have a very conservative styling, meaning that we don't have a lot of crazy lines going on here. It's typical Porsche, round shapes, round headlights here, with the headlight unit sitting inside of the front fender, looking very beautiful, and a nice little lip spoiler all the way down low, looking great. This is, I do believe, let's see, yeah, this is the GTS, so this is not the turbo. This is sort of underneath the turbo, but it's still a very cool looking design. I do wish we had different wheels than these black ones, because these wheels are just beautiful. I just want to have them be in silver or some other color than just black every single time we get new cars, like we have here, for example. Check this out. So the proportions of the Macan EV, if you look at these proportions, we have the A-pillar up here, and if you want to have an internal combustion A-pillar, you want to have them be in an SUV right slightly above the center of the front axle, exactly like we have in this case right here. You can see how we extend the A-pillar. It goes right where we want it in an SUV. If this were to be a sedan, we want to have it go straight to the center of the front axle. And this is also something you can think about if you want to sketch cars, to have the A-pillar have a straight line into the center point of the front axle. If you're sketching a coupe, wagon, or a sedan, for example, SUVs, it sits a little higher than that. But you can see the hood here. It doesn't have this blob design that we were used to seeing. Maybe we're going away a little bit from that now, which is great. But this feels like an internal combustion version. It feels like you can still have an engine underneath here. And I'm not sure, I don't think this is going to happen. Maybe, but it would be cool to see Porsche take this exact exterior design like we have on the Macan EV and make a hybrid version out of this. Because when I look at this, it feels like the Dodge Challenger or Charger Daytona, which they made both EV, full EV, and you can also have it with the Hurricane Inline 6. And you can see that in the design. When you look at the proportions of that car, you can see that you can definitely fit an internal combustion engine under the hood. And that is the same feeling I have here. We could probably fit, maybe a 4-cylinder would be interesting to see. I mean, we'd much rather have a V6 under here, but if a 4-cylinder is all we can fit here with some hybrid setup, it would be great to see. And that would also bring the Macan up to date. As the article was so worried about it being too old, we can still take this design and probably turn this into the next generation internal combustion engine Macan. Now, the regular Macan here is also one of the best looking SUVs on the market today. Clear Porsche design. They've come a long way since the first generation Cayenne, which felt like the designers just panicked and thought to themselves, we have made sports cars for 50 years, and now we need to make an SUV. How are we going to design that? Let's just take a bunch of graphic elements from the 911 and slap it onto an SUV and call it a day. The first Cayenne was just not a great looking design. However, the current Cayenne looks great. It's definitely grown up, and it definitely feels like a proper SUV now and not just a tweaked 911 that they just turned into a blob of an SUV like they did with the first generation of the Cayenne, now the SUVs of Porsche actually looks very, very good. You can see all the round features that we have here, and the more round features you have like this, the more timeless the design becomes. And that is, again, the reason why I think the Macan, as it is right now with these facelift versions, can definitely still be in production for another 5 years at least. Again, the black wheels here, you can see that we can't, there's no way we can appreciate the design of these wheels because they're all black. I do like that we have a yellow caliper here. Maybe yellow in contrast with the green is not the best spec, but still, just add some silver or some very dark silver design to these spokes and we would have a very cool looking Macan. Now looking at the rear end of the EV, again, very beautifully done. I love this graphics that we have, a typical Porsche with a nice one single line of light bar here, looking beautiful. We don't have any sort of different thicknesses on the light bar, which is totally fine. This looks very futuristic. Love the housing for it and how this line, the curvature, the chamfer around the key graphics up top, then continues down into the bumper here and swoops around and creates a nice framing housing for the top half of the graphics. Then we have the lower half being the more functional area with this diffuser here, for example. And in addition to that, we have line flow going all around the car. I forgot to mention that here we have this line, for example, right here at the bottom, cutting in and sort of having a connection to what's going on in the bumper. Even though I do wish that this line sat a little lower so we could have this line have a connection to what's going on in the rear as well. No exhaust pipes here either. I mean, this is an EV, obviously you're not going to have exhaust pipes, but if we were to imagine this being a internal combustion engine like this and have the quad pipes like this, I do think it would look very, very good. And it would definitely look like a modernized version of the current Macan that we have right here. But again, there is nothing about this design that feels outdated to me. One detail that they switched up with the facelift that I'm not a big fan of is the how far this lower section graphic sticks up into the rear end. It used to sit a lot lower than this. It used to sit something like this in the pre-facelift, and I thought that that looked so much better and have this entire piece here be body color still. This was the pre-facelift design. Now we have this entire piece sticking up way too far, in my opinion, up into the rear end. It still looks good, but it feels a little bit too much for me. I do like the taillight graphics here though. Beautifully done, very dynamic because we have a thicker piece here of the framing going into a thin piece in the middle, and you can see that the taillight design, the internal pieces, the LEDs, gains a little bit of thickness in the outer parts where it goes into the center, creating a very thin piece here. Then again, of course, on the other side coming back a little thicker. Beautiful design. Again, quad exhaust pipes just add some beefiness to this design. Feels very, very planted, this car. The GTS is probably the Macan that I would go for as well. Just a little bit more comfort and more GT vibes than the full-on turbo that we have for the Macan as well. Now looking at the interiors, this is a great looking interior for an EV. I mean, this is what I want to see more EV companies do. Add some more small features into the design. Make it feel welcoming inside and not just strip down and create a minimalistic, boring, no personality looking interior. This looks great. I'm not sure if this is an analog clock, but if it is, kudos to Porsche for keeping an analog clock up on the dash, looking great. This gauge cluster feels very interesting. We have a nice big chamfer here, even though I wish this cap for its reached further forward and it went above the screen. It feels like it sits almost behind the screen now, but again, we do have a nice integration of it. They designed the curvature of the dash to be a housing for the gauge cluster, which I appreciate. Then we have these two dual screens in the middle, one for the passenger right here, watch Netflix or do whatever they want. Then you have the infotainment screen in the middle. But look at this. Tactile and physical toggles for the climate control settings in a separate control panel down below from the infotainment screen, exactly like I've been saying that I want to see for the last 5 years, and I'm glad that Porsche decided to put that in the Macan EV. Looks like you have some sort of wireless charger here, a couple of cup holders, and overall the interior just looks great. It doesn't feel like a sterile, EV interior like I'm used to seeing from a lot of other manufacturers. Also like the design of the steering wheel, typical Porsche with the round centers, 3-spoke sporty design with the drive modes here, I do believe, and you have the controls for probably the gauge cluster configuration and cruise controls on each spoke. Now looking at the current Macan. This is probably where I think most people would say that, oh, the Macan is too old. We need a refresh. It's been in production since 2014. But again, this is why I think this has an advantage over its competitors, because this hasn't yet gone into this full pixelated world that we're seeing from the majority of manufacturers today. Look at how beautiful this cluster is. Thankfully, this is still an analog tachometer in the middle, right in the middle, exactly like you want in a sporty car. It doesn't matter if it's a sedan or whatever package it is. We still want to have a big rev counter in the middle like we have here. You have the screen for the map on the right side, and it feels like this is also maybe an analog speedometer on the left side. Just beautiful. This is what I think a lot of people still want today, and I do think a lot of people still want to pay. It doesn't matter if they pay the same prices for this layout that they would do for a competitor that has two big screens. In some cases, I'm talking personally for myself now, I would pay a premium to go back to a gauge cluster that looks this beautiful compared to what we have in most interiors today. We also have this control panel here, Macan, stamped in this metal piece with the climate control settings and the HVAC controls right there. And a small screen. It's not too big, it's not too small. It just fits between these two parallel lines inside here, fits perfectly inside of the dash with some nice different materials, making it feel like a premium product, which is of course is. In addition, last but not least, keeping the analog clock up there on the dash. This feels to me like a more premium design than what we have in the new Macan EV, for example. So I hope a lot of other companies follow what Porsche has done here and realize that if you want to keep your cash flow great, you need to still have a couple of internal combustion versions in your lineup as you figure out how to make EVs completely replace internal combustion engines, specifically for brands like Porsche, which sells, of course, to people who love driving, who love the sporty characteristics of the brand. And I think that is a challenge that a lot of car companies still have to overcome today when it comes to transition fully to EVs.